Hello and welcome to this second session looking at creation. So last week we looked at the whole of the creation story and we were focusing particularly on what that says about who is God. Now if you haven't seen that session, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that session from last week. But today's session we are going to be moving on from that, we're going to be looking at Genesis 1 verses 3 to 19, and we're going to specifically be looking at the creation of the earth and the sky. Okay, now as we go through this session, I am totally aware that there may be things that are challenging to each one of us. But I hope that this will always be encouraging. And I pray that as we go through these sessions, please feel free to drop things into the comments box. I will attempt to get back to you with those comments as quickly as possible. But this is a discussion. Whilst this is a video and it's a video for you to be watching in your own time, this is also a discussion. So feel free to share as you go through this video and drop things into the comments. So the first question then is, we're talking about the earth and the sky, is I just wonder what you think about when we talk about earth and sky. The other day when we were doing this session live with a group of young people, and I asked them what they thought about when we said earth and sky, they came up and they said about things that we can see. So they talked, one said about the sun and said that when they think about the sky, they think about the sun. Another one, when we talk about earth, said they think about the beach. Somebody else said that when they think about earth, they think about the globe. And so it's really interesting. I wonder what you think about when you hear the word earth or when you hear the word sky. Drop your comments into the comments box in relationship to that question. But let's look at the creation story now of earth and sky. And this goes over 4 days. So I'm just going to read to you. We're going to break it down. I'm just going to read to you day 1. Okay, and this is in Genesis 1 verses 3 to 5. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and there was morning, one day. Now, as we think about that passage, the first thing that really, for me, that really stands out is the fact that we talked last week about the fact that God speaks. Well, when God speaks, things happen. There is power in God's word. And as he speaks here, he creates light. So words are extremely powerful. When we speak, our words are powerful. I want you to think for a moment about the fact that when somebody says something to you that's maybe hurtful or negative, those words can hurt. Those words can really infiltrate our bodies, our minds, our hearts, our souls. It can have a huge impact on us. And it's through those words that things can happen within us that make us become maybe not so positive, that can lead to all sorts of things like depression or anger, or all sorts of things can happen. And where does it come from? It can come from words. Now, I'm not saying this is only words that do this, but words are a big thing. Similarly, if we say something, or if someone says something really positive to us, then it affects us in a positive way. What's interesting is if the words have been negative over our life, and those words are more words, negative words, than positive words, then the negativity outweighs the positive. And therefore, when someone says something positive to us, it combats against the negative. The bottom line is that the more positive words that we hear, the more positive we will be as people. And it works in the reverse way as well. We need to be people that speak positivity. We speak positivity to people, but we also speak positivity over ourselves. So, for example, if we say to ourselves, oh, I'm really stupid, or I'm really thick, or I'm really this, that, and the other, we are speaking negativity over ourselves. But if we speak positively over ourselves, then those words are powerful. So words are extremely powerful, and we are just as powerful in our words, and this can be a whole new other thing that we could talk about at another date. But words can be so powerful that because God's words are powerful, God creates things. We have power in our words that also can create things. Now, I'm not saying that we can say, let there be light and there is light, but I will also say that in the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, it does talk about the authority of Jesus and the fact that when we speak with the authority of Jesus and when we speak in the name of Jesus, that we can command things to happen. But that's a whole new teaching, and we can look at that at another date. But the basic point here is our words are so powerful. Moving on from this, God said, let there be light. And there was light. Now, what is absolutely amazing here, and bear with me with this because we're going to see light come up again on day 4. But on day 1, the word light here means illumination. So God creates illumination. What does that therefore mean? But was there before illumination? Well, if we just flick back in Genesis, if we go back to Genesis 1 verse 2 says, now the earth was formless and empty, darkness covered the surface of the watery depths. There was darkness. There was darkness at the very beginning. And that is very, very clear. It's there in the Bible. There was darkness. So what God is doing is creating light in the darkness. It then goes on to say in Genesis 1 verse 3 to 5 that God separated the light from the darkness. So he creates light and then he separates the light from the darkness. He separates that illumination from, and the word darkness in the original Hebrew means it means a dark place. It means misery. So in the darkness, there is misery. We know that, again, just going back previously in Genesis, it says that the earth was formless and empty. There's nothing there. Think about when we sit in the dark, what's there? There's nothing. So God creates light, and he brings light into the darkness, and he separates that darkness and light. So he creates two things. This also touches on Jesus, because Jesus said in John 8 verse 12, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. What's interesting is the word light that Jesus uses here, which is in Greek, is meaning luminous. It also means fire, but it means luminous. And we see the two similarities. In the Hebrew, the word light here means illumination, and in the Greek, when Jesus speaks, he is talking about luminous. He is talking about illumination as well. Jesus comes to illuminate the light in the darkness. He comes to illuminate, to glow out, to radiate out into the darkness. And anyone who follows him, Jesus says, anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness. Why? When we think about illumination, when we think about an luminous thing, what do we think about? It's bright light. It shines out. It shines brightly in the darkness. You can't miss it. You can't mistake it. So when we follow Jesus, we walk in a bright light. It can't be missed. Jesus can't be missed. And we, when we follow him, can't be missed. What does that mean? People notice a difference about us. When we truly, truly accept Jesus Christ into our lives as Lord and Saviour, we walk differently. And people recognize that. So there's a link here. I believe there is a link here between the creation and with Jesus. And we could go on for ages looking at this, but we're sticking with the creation story and the whole thing of earth and sky. So I'm going to drop back now into Genesis 1, verses 3 to 5. So we have got that whole thing of light and darkness. So God on day one creates light and darkness. Now, if we go on to day 2, question for you before we start is, how long is a day? When we think about a day, how long do we think about it? 24 hours. Okay. Now, do we think that time has changed over years? Because there is a debate and an argument for the fact that time has changed over years, that when the Bible was written, a day was a different thing, a year was a different thing, and so and I'm just going to leave that there for a moment, because that is a train of thought. People do think that, and you may be one of them. That's okay, if that's what you feel. But let's just go through this. So look at day. We're sticking just on day 1 at the moment, because it says at the end of that in Genesis 1 verse 5, there was an evening and there was a morning one day. Now, the word day comes from an Arabic word. So it's a Hebrew word, but it's influenced by an Arabic word, which means heat of the day. So the day is actually the time when there is heat on the earth. There is heat there. Now remember, God has only created light and he separated it from the darkness. But within that light, there is heat. There is night. He calls God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So within the darkness there is called night. What does the Hebrew word for night mean? The Hebrew word for night means a twist away from the light. So it's the opposite to light. The opposite of light is darkness. The opposite of day is what we call night. So there was an evening. The word evening means dusk. The Hebrew original word means dusk. So there is a dusk. When we think about dusk, what's dusk? Dusk is the time when the light fades. Now we think now that dusk is the time when the sun goes down, and that's right, and we're going to look at that again in a little bit more. But just bear with me for a minute. Light disappears. It's when the light disappears that the dusk comes in. So that's the evening. What's the morning? Well, the word morning means dawn. What do we think of dawn? Well, we think now of when the sun rises. Bear with me. Day 4, we're going to look at the sun and moon. But here, what are we talking about with dawn? We're talking about the light reappearing. Okay, so there is a very clear distinction. We have got day, which is the time when there is heat on the earth. We have got night, which is the opposite, and with night comes comes coldness. So we've got coldness, so we've got the opposite to the heat. We've got the dusk, which breaks up the light and the darkness, and we have got the dawn, which does it the other way round, that separates it again. There's the separation that God created. So then we get what God says, one day. Now the word one means united. In the original Hebrew word here, which is echad, and forgive me for my pronunciations if they're not right, but it means united. It means one, wholeness, completeness, united together. Okay, so that whole thing of having the heat, having the dawn, the dusk, having the twist away from the light or the heat and the coldness, all of that is united. It's one. It's one thing. And if you think about that, that is our cycle. Our cycle, and it says here, one day. That's our cycle. Of all those things, adds into one day. So, as we move into Genesis 1 verse 6 to 8, we're looking at day 2. In day 2, God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters, separating water from water." So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse sky. Evening came, then morning the second day. What's awesome here, what I find absolutely awesome here, is back in Genesis 1:2, we talk about the watery depths. Everything was watery. Okay? God here on day 2 has created this light in the darkness. He's separated it. He's now separating water. So you've got, what we then have is water here. We have a separation, and we have water here. And he calls that water, he calls that expanse sky. Now bear with me, because we then have what we call, and has been come to be called, the firmament. Okay, now the firmament, the word sky in the original Hebrew actually means heaven. Bear with me, i.e. the firmament which seems to be spread out like a vault over the globe. So first thing, there is a train of thought that the earth is flat, okay, and that there's a flat earth. Well, the Bible clearly gives us the whole thing here about what the sky is, that the sky is a firmament which seems to spread out like a vault over the globe. Okay, what's a globe? Well, a globe we know is circular. Okay, so there's that, the world is round. The Bible clearly states that and shows that. So we have got this globe. We've got water on the globe. We've got water up here. And we have got this expanse which God calls sky. What does God do? He creates a firmament which is spread out like a vault around the globe. Now, some of you may have seen the Simpsons movie. And in the Simpsons movie where they put a dome over Springfield, it works in a very similar way. Okay, it's a dome that goes round the whole of the globe. So it's a sphere, really. It's a sphere. And that is what gives us our protection from the water here, which is the global water, and the water up here with that separation. Now, we could spend a whole load of time just looking at this and going into all sorts of things with just this as well. But what I want us to just focus on here is the fact that God has created a protection around our globe. He has created a water here, he's created a sky here, and there's water further up. Now, bear with me, okay? Because one thing that I want us to be thinking about here is we can be listening to this and we can be going, oh, this is absolutely crazy. This is, I can't get this into my head. What on earth? How can there be water up there and everything? God is bigger, okay? God created all of this. And God is bigger than we can ever imagine. So therefore, if God is bigger than anything we can imagine, okay, then we can't even comprehend anything that God does. We just can't. We try. Why do we try? Because as human beings, we want to know. We want to be in these things. Okay, we want to. That's why theories are created, because we have theories which we believe to be right, but we're not sure, because we want to try and second guess how God does things. We want to be the ones in control. So let's just get to a point where we actually say, do you know what? I'm not going to understand everything. I'm not going to get everything, because God is bigger than me. My mind is limited, but God's mind is limitless. Okay, so all we can go on is what we have in the Bible, in the words, and within those words, we have a very, very clear expanse, which is sky, which is a firmament, which separates the water from the water. So let's go to day 3. In day 3, God said, let the water under the sky be gathered into one place and let dry land appear. So God now is talking about the globe again, and he separates the water on the globe and creates dry land. Dry land being what we now in theory call earth. Okay, it's earth, it's ground, it's dry. And it was so. God called the dry land earth. What's interesting is the word earth in the original Hebrew means land, continent, or country. Okay, and we know that countries were formed in some way. So God creates all of that on day 3. And the gathering the water he called seas. And the word seas actually means a large body of water. Okay, we've got a very, very clear, if we think about the world and we think about what the globe looks like, we know that the globe is made up of dry land and wet land or water. Okay, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees. So God creates fruit trees. He creates vegetation. What's awesome here is that I really feel that God is creating all of this because he knows that he is going to create human beings. God knows he's going to create human beings. Even here on day 3, he's already starting to put things in place to create something ready for humans. Why on earth would he put fruit trees on a land if fruit wasn't to be eaten and if fruit was just going to sit there and rot and die? Okay, so God created all these things ready for human beings, and we're going to look at this in a few weeks' time when we talk about human beings. But I just want to highlight here the fact that if God knew on day 3 that he was going to create human beings, then he knows that he is going to create every single one of us. Every single one of us is created by God. Every single one of us is created by God. None of us are a mistake. None of us were an accident. We were all created by God. Yes, there is the human element, and we know all of that. And we're not going to go into that right now because we know it. Okay, but God knew. God knew when 2 people were going to come together and were going to create us. God knew all of that. If he knows that he is creating fruit and vegetation for human beings, he knows each one of us. We're not a mistake. We're not an accident. God loves us no matter what. Okay, so, and that comes back to, again, positive words and negative words earlier on. If we're sensing that we may have been a mistake or an accident, or we've been told that. Okay, but I just want to encourage you that none of us are. None of us are a mistake. God knows. God produced each one of us, created each one of us for this specific time for now. Okay, so God creates seed-bearing plants and fruit trees. Now, we're going to look at this next week a little bit more, but I just want to pull out here that it says that God said, let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. Now, this phrase, according to their kinds, actually means a sort or species. God created a fruit tree to be a fruit tree. God created an apple tree to grow apples, a pear tree to grow apples, a strawberry bush to grow strawberries, okay, a raspberry bush to grow raspberries. Okay, a rose produces a rose. God created everything according to their kinds. And as I say, we're going to look at this a bit more next week when we talk about animals, because it is a hot topic at times. I just, I don't want to go into it in massive detail here because we don't have the time. But next week we will look at this in a bit more detail. So God knew he was creating an apple tree to produce an apple because he knew that humans were coming. That's pretty awesome, okay? And it was so. The earth produced vegetation, seed-bearing plants according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Evening came, then morning, the third day. That completion again, that wholeness, that oneness. Then we come to day 4. God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night. Now remember, day 1, he created that separation of light and darkness. What he does now, the word light here, let there be light in the expanse. In that sky, remember the sky from day 2, God creates a light. Now the word light here in the Hebrew actually does definitely mean a light. And we know that the A light is the sun and the moon. So God creates the sun and the moon on day 4. But what's even bigger here is that he says they will serve as signs for seasons, for days and years. God, on day 4, creates time. Before that, there was no time. Now I know that we have got that circulation of going on between of the night and the day and everything. I totally get that. But I'm talking about an extended time. Okay? There was no time until day 4. There was no sense of anything like a season until day 4. So we know that we have winter, spring, summer and autumn. That was all created from day 4. There will be lights in the expanse of the sky to provide light on the earth. And it was so. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule over the day and the lesser light to rule over the night, sun and moon, as well as the stars. God placed the stars there on day 4. God placed them in the expanse of the sky to provide light on the earth, to rule the day and the night. So we have a clear understanding of when the night is and when the day is. Previous to this, we'd just got illumination and darkness. But now we have got, and this is where I feel that there's a real beauty in what God is creating, because he creates the sun. And if we think about sunrise and sunsets, that beautiful picture in the sky of different colors. God is an awesome, awesome artist. He really is an awesome artist in that painting of the sunrise and the sunset. When you look at the next sunset or the next sunrise, think that's God creating that painting in the sky. He's rising that sun. He's setting that sun. That's mind-blowing. Oh, it is for me anyway. God placed them in the expanse of the sky to provide light on the earth, to rule the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. Evening came, then morning, the 4th day. Okay? God has created time. On day 4, God has created time. He has created the sun and the moon. He has created within that seasons. The word seasons is, in the Hebrew, it actually means a fixed time or season or festival. And that's really interesting, because when we think about festivals and we go back to over hundreds of years, particularly in the UK and in the Western world, people worshipped the sun. They worshipped the moon. They worshipped these things that were in the sky. And everything they did was set by the sun and the moon. Now, whilst we know there's a God and God is to be worshipped and nothing else is to be worshipped, you can see, and we will come on to this in future weeks when we see what Satan does in the garden. But we can see how people were deceived to think that the sun and the moon were gods, because God created them. God said that they would rule. It is through them that we have time, seasons. Why wouldn't, in all honesty, why wouldn't people think that they are the God? They control things. But there's actually a bigger thing behind that, and it's God. God has ultimate control over the sun, over the moon, over the seasons. And so if we go back to the question I said earlier on about a day, and has the time of a day changed, I'm going to leave that question with you to think about that as we've seen through all of this, and we've talked about the fact that the day, a very clear definition of day, a very clear definition of night, a very clear fact that God then puts the sun into the day and the moon into the night, and then within that whole thing of the dusk and the dawn, the fact that obviously the sun sets and the sun rises and the moon rises and the moon disappears. Okay, a day is that whole cycle. Has that cycle ever changed? And within that, does the cycle of seasons ever change? Now, we can talk about the fact that sometimes we can say, oh, we've been through 4 seasons in one day and all of that with the weather and everything. But I want us to just think, I'm just going to leave that with you to really think about the fact of, time and seasons and what is happening, what is happening in our world at the moment with weather and all of that. So, quick overview, the first 4 days, God creates day 1, light and darkness. Day 2, he creates the sky. Day 3, he creates earth and vegetation. Day 4, he creates the sun and the moon and time. And so I just wonder that if someone asked you now, okay, how was the earth made? What would you say? So bless you. That's our second session in looking at the creation. Next week, as I mentioned already, we're going to look at animals. We're going to go through Genesis 1 verses 20 to 25. And that's going to flag up a whole load of things, I'm pretty sure. But as I've always said at the beginning, feel free to comment, feel free to share this video with your friends, with your family, and yeah, just comment below. And if you want to log on and do the live, for any young people out there that want to log on and do the live session with us, it's on a Wednesday night between 5 and 6. Okay, bless you all.